Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on Max Diff and Turf Analysis Simulator. Today, I'm going to be talking, as I just mentioned, about what is Max Diff, as well as what's Turf Simulator, and how can you use it when it comes to things like market research and figuring out feature importance, as well as combinations that yield the highest reach or market reach. So that's going to be the main focus point for today. My name is Stijn Menzel, so I'm going to be your host for today. Before I start with that, let me first tell you a little bit about the platform we're using today for this webinar. So the webinar today is hosted on Livestorm. Livestorm is a purely chat-based program. So if you have any questions today, and please feel free to ask them because it makes the webinar simply more interactive and more entertaining for everyone. Then in the lower right corner, you can see the chat and the question section, as well as the polls, where I think I will be hosting 2 polls during today's webinar. So let me be the first to post something in the chat. And what I will immediately do is already put up a poll. That's simply a question. So in the lower right corner, you'll see a section called polls, and there should be one now. And the first question I want to ask you guys is, what's your main goal for joining the webinar today? Is it to better understand the topic, to see if this methodology fits to your company, to basically get more information about a methodology you're already using, pure curiosity, or anything else? Okay, so let me, oh, there it should be. Where did it go? So a few votes in. Oh, we got a tie so far. So the reason I asked this question, so again, for those that just joined, in the lower right corner, you'll see the polls, and that's just the question there to see what your main focus is. So now we have a 4-way tie. So in this case, I'm going to try and keep it broad so that I keep everybody's main goal in mind. And if there's something like to better understand the topic, or if it's just curiosity, then it's going to be mainly questions based. If everybody says to better use this methodology, I might go a bit more in depth, etc. Okay. So then without further ado, I'm going to start sharing my screen and telling you a little bit about Max Diff and Turf analysis. So there we go. So what I'm going to be talking about today, and that was also the bad word pun, I believe, in our LinkedIn design, is I'm going to also be looking at meat and meat alternatives and how you can use something like Max Diff to find, first of all, what do people prefer, but also which combinations basically yield the highest reach. Now, I'll talk more about reach later on. But with reach, we are often implicating basically how many people would be activated by a specific combination of choices. Now, before I jump into that, I'm going to first give a quick intro into Conjointly as well as myself. But then I'll get that out of the way as quickly as possible and jump in first into Max Diff. I'm going to link that to the case study with the meat and meat alternatives, and then link it also to the turf analysis simulator. Now, at the end, I have more than enough time for Q&A. However, I would always say, as soon as a question pops up, or you would like a little bit more elaboration or something like that, just write it immediately in the chat in the question section. And there's no real difference. I think the questions can be upvoted and the chat cannot. I think that's about as far as it goes. Okay. So briefly about Conjoint, or Conjointly, sorry. So Conjointly is a survey and research platform. So we're a platform where you can do a lot of different tests. So you already see a few here. So our namesakes like generic conjoint and brand specific conjoint. Max Diff is one of the ones we use quite frequently, as well as things like PVS. So that's more about concept testing, price testing with Gabor Granger or Van Wessendorp. We do claims testing a lot, turf analysis simulator, as well as now, for example, the Kano model, which is more about finding which features or options are classified as being performance. What else do we have? Performance, must be, indifferent, or attractive needs. So there's a lot of different methodologies that we have. And the other thing I just want to focus on is that those last 2 words, expert support. One thing we really focus on is that you don't write to us. You don't always have to write an email to us to write to support@conjointly.com and then wait 2 days to get a reply, and then it takes 2 days for you to get back, etc. We do it all via chat function because we noticed that just simply took too much time doing emails constantly, whereas most of the time we can solve it within 5 minutes in the chat. But I'll talk more about that later. Then briefly about myself. So my name is Stijn Mensel. I'm a lecturer for quantitative market research here at Conjointly. My background is mainly in statistics and research methods. So that's why I host these webinars and do talks and do in-house trainings and online trainings and things like that for a lot of our clients. Before I joined Conjointly, I spent the majority of my career in academia, focusing on things like research methods, statistics, behavioral psychology, but even things like talent identification in sports. The main underlying theme is with numbers and with understanding research methodologies, you can already do a lot. But I always also focus on things you cannot do with numbers. Basically, without without interpretation of numbers and without also critically thinking about numbers, it's very hard to not be biased by the results you get. So that's also something I'm going to highlight a little bit today. Then the question maybe will be, why this webinar? Well, hopefully you already have an idea about that because you decided to join. But so what we often had in the past before we adapted our Max Diff to be the way it is now, we would often see that a lot of people, instead of using either Conjoint or Max Diff, we're testing consumer preferences using Likert skills. Now, I come from an academic background where Likert skills are treated as gods, even though you could make the argument, is it ordinal or interval? But often what you see is if, let's say I have 4 items on my menu. So they look something like this. And then I ask people that come into my restaurant, could you please take a small bite of each one and rank how much you like them on a Likert scale? So in this case, a 5-point Likert scale. Now, what you're going to see most of the time is a distribution something like this. Of course, it can be a bit more to the red instead of to the green. But what you notice here is already a little bit of an issue that comes inherently to using Likert skills. First of all, you're going to get a lot of ties. So in this case, is the first better than the third, and is the second better than the fourth? It's very hard to distinguish. Secondly, the way I interpret a Likert scale, for me, probably the green smile, the darkest green, so the left emoji, I would probably only use on one because there can only be one the best. Or for other people, they say, no, I like all of them, so they should all be the left hand emoji. Or somebody who eats a lot of burgers might say, no, all of these do not meet my standards. So the way people interpret something like a Likert scale can be quite different. So it's also difficult to compare between people. Then, depending on my mood, if I have a bad day, I'm going to lean more towards the red side of a spectrum compared to the left. So that's another issue when it comes to Likert scales. And the last one is, whenever you do something like this, you'll see that people fill in the Likert scale very accurately for the, let's say, the first 3 or 4 options. But if you're testing 20 options, at the end, they're basically streamlining. So they're going middle, 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 one to the right, middle, 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 one to the left, middle, 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 etc. So that's a very common occurrence that we often have to try and solve by filtering out useless data, etc. And in addition to that problem with Likert skills, we often get a lot of type of response biases. Now, response biases are basically just the opposite of random biases. So random biases are just things that basically can happen, and most of the time they happen equally on one side as on the other, so you can negate them to a degree. But when it comes to things like acquiescence bias or social desirability bias, they mainly take place when it comes to Likert skill questions or just any type of skill questions. So something like acquiescence bias is participants typically tend to agree with any type of phrasing you have to a sentence. So how much do you like this burger? You're priming them already with the word like. Oh, I must like the burger. How much would you be willing to pay for this apartment? That's already a leading question because that means that you would do a bid on this house. So those elements you got there. Social desirability means, well, I'm joining a questionnaire. Somebody took the trouble to create a survey. So let me just answer it in the way I kind of think they want me to go. Courtesy bias, that's when people typically tend to be not as negative as they would be simply out of courtesy. If you go to something like booking.com, just try to look for hotels that have below a 5 rating. Now, first of all, Booking doesn't really allow you to rate below 5, but there are ways. Most of the time it's not, because let's say you come back and you rate something on Booking, you go, Well, not everything was horrible, even though it might have been your worst holiday in your life. But you go, you know, the person behind the counter was nice. So let me give them at least a 5 out of 10. And then demand bias is simply a bias by being incorporated into a study where you often change your behavior because you are asked a direct question. Now, the last one is also a little bit of a role in any type of survey, but I still just want to highlight there's a few biases. And whenever you have a bias, the issue is your data becomes less reliable. So one of the main alternatives that was developed a long time ago is MaxDiff. And so MaxDiff stands for Maximum Difference Scale. And MaxDiff compared to something like either a Likert scale or ranking. So that's simply saying, okay, which of these 5 do you like the most, which do you like the least? People will do that very accurately for the first 2 sets. And after that, they stop caring. But I'll talk more about that later. So benefit of MaxDiff is instead of me asking, please rate all these 5 items, I show you 5 items or 20 items in different combinations. And I ask you, which do you like the most and which do you like the least? That's it. That's the entire foundation of a MaxDiff questionnaire. What do you like the most? What do you like the least? And based on that, I get very clear understanding about what do people like. So what does an individual like? What does Bob like? What does a subsegment like? So I'll talk more about that later. But so what do women like compared to men? What do different age groups like, etc. As well as what does the whole sample like? And then often the way we do research is the sample has to be a representation of the population you're looking for. Now, results are quite robust because we ask a very clear question and we ask you to discriminate. So if I ask you which do you like the most and which do you like the least, there's no possibility for ties. Because I'm not asking you to look into the middle gray area. I'm just asking you what's best and what's worst. Now, if you combine this with something called the turf analysis simulator, which we'll talk to in the back end of today's webinar, we're also going to link that very heavily to market reach. So as I mentioned, MaxDiff stands for maximum difference scaling, also known as best worst scaling. It's quite similar to Conjoint. I would say it's an adapted method or a kissing cousin or whatever. It's very close. So because they both ask you to choose. So they're both called choice-based tasks, and they're about making trade-offs. So I show you 5 options. So for example, 5 flavors or 5 colors or 5 brands, and I ask you which you like the most, which you like the least. So you have to make the trade-off between what do I like and what don't I like. Then the main difference between conjoint analysis and MaxDiff, and I'll talk more about that on my next slide, is conjoint analysis really looks at summing up products and looks more about the combinations. And MaxDiff looks more about what does every individual prefer. So conjoint is more about summing, and MaxDiff is more about individual elements and individual trends. Now, our version is slightly different because most of the time you do MaxDiff for one element, you do it for flavor, you do it for which of these benefit packages do you like the most, which of these subscription packages do you like the most, etc. We also allow it to be adapted to test multiple attributes at the same time or multiple features, as well as brand and things like that. So that's a little bit of an intro to MaxDiff. Just to indicate clearly what the differentiation is between MaxDiff and conjoint, because I mentioned they're close to each other. Let me start with similarities and then focus on the differences. So the similarities are they're both complicated or not advanced analytical mathematical tools. The underlying formula, the multinomial logistic regression is, I would say, fairly comparable. They're both based on trade-off decisions. They both use utility scores based on multinomial logistic regression. And both are discrete choices. And discrete choice simply means you have to make a choice. It's yes or no to a choice. So let me first focus on MaxDiff. So MaxDiff, here we see it on the left. So with MaxDiff, I would ask you about, let's say in this case, it's 4 different colors. Which of these 4 colors for a phone cover do you find the most appealing and which do you find the least appealing? Sorry, it's small font. So I ask you to make a choice, so a discrete choice, which do I like the most, which do I like the least. It's a direct polling method. Conjoint analysis, on the other hand, focuses more on choosing one element out of a set of combinations and really looks at the summation of which of these options do you like the most. So the example we see here is about, I think, a mobile phone subscription. And so whichever you choose, the one you choose gets more weight, so to speak. We indicate that this is something you like and the other two is something you don't like. And if we do that often enough, we can figure out what does this person like specifically, but also which elements of each part do you like. So it's more focused on the combinations. Now, when would you use MaxDiff? Now, MaxDiff is really good for ranking. And I can't emphasize this enough. If you want clear ranking, let's say you have 20 items, you want to know which is the best and which is the worst, then MaxDiff is the way to go. As well as if you want to figure out basically which do people like the most, but also do different people like different items more. So that's why I go with meat and meat alternatives, because I want to have a look at what do people that have a regular diet, so meat-based diet, have compared to vegetarian and vegans. So you can also look at consumer satisfaction or different type of flavor variants, color types, etc., as well as how often people use it. So we often do that with an additional question. Conjoint analysis, I would do this for more concept testing elements or price testing. Now, conjoint analysis is a very adaptable method, so you can also use it for claims testing. So if you want to test things like emotional claims, sustainability claims, reason to believe, benefits, all of that's possible. And it's a lot more focused on things like price sensitivity or marginal willingness to pay. So let's take it to an example. MaxDiff, let's say you're making a new car, and for that car, you want to figure out which color is most preferred. So in that case, you try to create a robust ranking of which colors do consumers prefer the most. And for a conjoint, it would be more about figuring out how many doors do people want, what type of engine, should it be a gas, should it be diesel, should it be hydrogen, should it be electric, etc. What type of tire should it have, how much torque, etc. So that's more conjoint analysis. It's more about concept testing or eventually price testing. So what I want to do now is upload a second question in the poll section just to see if I'm being clear enough. And the question in this case is, which of the following questions should you not try to answer with a MaxDiff? So this is a bit of a negative question. So should you not use a MaxDiff for creating a robust ranking of potentially viable SKUs, to prioritize software feature development, to find the optimal price point for a singular product, or to create two opposing SKUs with the highest market reach? Okay, there's a few in. So again, if you want to answer that question, in the lower right corner, you see chat, and then questions, then polls. And in the polls, it is the, I think it's the second poll you'll probably see right now. Okay, only a few in, but everybody that answered it got it completely correct. So in this case, MaxDiff is ideal to find things like rankings or prioritization or different schematics about two options. It's not ideal for pricing. That's more conjoint analysis or other types of research like feature placement matrix. But so it does highlight that other options are very viable. We often do this also now for software research because it makes a lot of sense to know which feature is important, but also which feature is not important, because otherwise you're developing 10 things at the same time, and that often leads to more bugs, etc. So let's link this to a business case. This is for a company I have now named Big Yum. So that's not their original name, but it's simply, I don't want to get copyright claimed for the actual study. It's actually one that we're running still right now. So we're still collecting data this week. I think this week is when we close data collection. So Big Yum is a food manufacturer, and they want to diversify their portfolio with meat and meat alternatives. At the moment, they're mainly focused on meat. They have like one meat alternative, but they noticed that people are buying less meat, and compared to other meat alternatives, though theirs look relatively generic, etc. So they want to have a look into the current market. Now, for those, I think everybody here knows the meat market is one that's very rapidly adjusting. So it's very interesting. It's growing massively, but it's also rapidly adjusting. That's why you need market research to figure out what is viable right now, what will be viable in 3 months, and so on. So they want to look at which flavor, that's their main question, as well as maximizing reach, for example, having one meat and one meat alternative flavor, as well as what is the balance or the preference for things like meat alternative types, different options, tastes, claims, and sustainability claims. So based on that research question, we set up 3 main research questions. The first is simply, which flavor profile do people prefer the most? What's the ideal combination? Now, typically I would do that more with a conjoint, but if we're already doing a Max Diff, I can do it in a Max Diff as well. And which combination of both meat and non-meat would reach the highest amount of consumers? So what I would use for that is I would use a Max Diff for the first 2 and a turf analysis simulator for the latter. And that's exactly what I'm going to show you in a second. So whenever you set up a Max Diff, and that's going to be the next step here, you can do a Max Diff on anything. It's simply anything you want to prioritize. So it can be flavor, pack size, format, the amount of cameras on a smartphone, types of camera on a smartphone. I don't know how I got the smartphones, tea flavors, smelling, so smelling flavors or smells, etc. So we've used it for a lot of different things. One benefit is we automatically show you sample size requirements, and we don't just show somebody one. So let's say you have 20 different flavors you want to test. That doesn't mean we automatically show 20 and we just want to know which is best, which is worse. But we ask that in a combination of, let's say, 3 to 5 different options. We ask you continuously which you like the most, which you like the least. So everything is featured relatively the same amount of times. So we also get clear indication of which is most preferred, but also probably which is second and third, or which is the least and second and third from the bottom. So let's have a look at what a study like that looks like when it comes to meat and meat alternatives. Let me jump to the screen. Just as a quick promotional plug, if you want to read more about Max Diff and not have an hour-long webinar again, we have a 2-minute video also explaining it, as well as some of the graphs that are going to look familiar in a second. And if you ever run into questions, as I mentioned, we really focus on customer support. So just write in the chat with us. So at the moment, because I'm doing the webinar, you're going to reach probably Fanos, Angelica, or Antonio. So we always, in every single time zone, have somebody available for the chat. So 2 hours from now, for example, Kirill will take over in the US. So just to highlight that. But let's look at an experiment. So this is the default one we did. So this is the first small study we launched. So you describe your product. And in this case, it was purely focused on flavor. So it was basically flavor testing. So we have things like chicken, beef, portobello, turkey, falafel. They wanted aubergine instead of eggplant because I think aubergine sounds fancier, and apparently you can use both. Then we have chickpea and we have walnut. I added emojis here instead of pack shots because the pack shots are theirs. So this is just to show what it would look like. You can always preview what an experiment likes. You can simply add levels or add different attributes and things like that. And what you'll notice is we automatically update the recommended sample size. Rule of thumb, the more attributes and levels you have, the bigger your sample size will be because we have to test more. So if I remove this, let's see, do I jump back to 100 or do I stay at 150? No, I stay at 150. So an experiment, we often start with a short intro page. Then in this case, for me, it's very important that I know what type of diet do they have, because that makes a lot of sense when I start to filter results. So flexitarian, regular diet, vegan, etc. And you can also, of course, specify. So I'm going to just say flexitarian for now. And then I see these options. So which do I like the most? Well, I probably, that's a good one, actually. I haven't, so I like chickpea, to be honest. And the one I don't really like the taste of walnuts. And that's basically how you just go through it. Then I see another option. this case, maybe I'll go with beef. And yeah, I mentioned I like chickpeas. But it could be that after a while, I'll go, well, I actually prefer falafel or portobello over a chickpea, etc. So that's how you can go through it. If you notice you make a mistake, and I notice I just did because I said chickpea is worst, whereas it should be eggplant in my case, you can just go back. And another thing I did in this experiment is you can add any type of additional questions. So you saw the current diet. What I also asked is, how often do you buy, or how often do you eat plant-based meat alternatives? The reason I ask eat and not buy is because we notice a lot of people buy it but never eat it, or they only eat it if their spouse makes them eat it. Then a question about, are you trying to reduce, as well as, do you want to give us additional information, because this is still a little bit of concept testing. And that's all you need to do. Adding a question, by the way, is as simple as just going to the menu, selecting whatever you want to add. You want the test price sensitivity, you can. And I think most of these questions are actually now in here as well. Yeah. So you just type in meat and you select everything relating to meat-related questions and you just add them. So that's what the design looks like. This is what the experiment looks like, very simplistic. And this is what the results look like. So in this case, the first thing you'll notice is chicken is by far the winner. Winner, winner, chicken dinner, so to speak. Then second is beef, then turkey, and the first vegetarian option is walnuts. I don't agree with that, but that's the result. But this gives me some information, but this is for everybody. So let's first have a look at people with a regular diet. And because I have that question, all I have to do is click basically in segments and say, yeah, people with regular diet should be one cohort, people with flexitarian, non-meat, etc. So you can group them. You can make and or if statements, whatever. So in this case, regular diet, chicken is the winner, then beef, and then turkey. And those that have a non-meat diet, well, obviously they're not really going for beef or chicken. Their main winner in this case is walnuts. So again, to my surprise, so we see that walnut is the winner for that subsegment. We can also look at people that eat at least once a week. Again, we see it's chicken. So in this case, we added an open question indicating also interpret, if you're vegetarian, interpret the other flavors as being non-meat versions. So like the fake chicken burger you can get at some McDonald's. So we can see that it's actually chicken and walnuts that people buy mostly as the plant-based alternative. We can look at the ranked list of concepts. Well, that's easy. It's chicken we know is best, but the second best in this case for this group is walnuts. We can do that for everything. You can look at how many people had a regular diet. And let's see, in this case, this was the vegetarian. So we actually have a quite nice, so flexitarian was the most and regular. Now, in this case, I didn't get that many vegetarians out of 200 people. We can very simply set a quota and say I need 50% vegetarians, 50% meat eaters. Frequency of buying, plant-based options, I think that's quite high, more than once or more a week, 45%. And are they trying to reduce their meat intake? So we also have questions like that. So that's kind of what the results look like if you do a simple type of study. We can look at these different levels. I'm going to talk about this turf in a second. I just want to show you that we can also make it a bit more complicated. And for example, say, instead of just looking at the flavor, which I just copy and pasted over here, I also add what type of meat. So what type of meat or meat alternative is it? Like a patty, a sausage, a slice, a hot dog, or a strip. Do they prefer meat, vegetarian, or vegan? Now, this is not the best question to add. It was more just I wanted a few variables. What type of taste claim? Is it juicy, tender, crispy, crunchy, soft, and chewy? Bleeding was one that a lot of people didn't like, but it used to be one that was often highlighted when it comes to selling steaks, as well as sustainability claims and things like that. So it's all very easy to add. Again, if you want to add an attribute, you just click Add Attribute. Sample size will be automatically calculated. So let me remove this one for now. And then once it's done, I can preview it again. Again, any questions you want to add, it's all very easy. In this case, I added a Van Westendorp, so I asked them, please consider a meat alternative. And what product would you buy a meat alternative product? Or sorry, at which price point would you think that a meat alternative product, so in this case, dollars excluding, exclusive of tax, is either a bargain, too cheap that it can't be good, so basically you don't trust what you eat, a bargain, expensive, or simply too expensive that I'm not going to pay. The reason I do that is because it gives me a little bit of price information. Then all you have to do is like that. Let's look at what the study looks like. Oh, it's still generating the preview. It's taking a bit longer than normal. If you want participants, we got 3 options. We have BYO. You can use redirect if you already have a panel, either a panel provider, or if you, for example, want to use this as a redirect because you're using another type of survey platform, something like SurveyMonkey or whatever. You can just simply API redirect us, or the only thing people will notice is that the URL changes, and 99% or 99.9% will never see a URL change. If you want a specific panel, we have things like GenPop. They automatically give you a price estimation and a time to completion estimation right here. You can make that very specific. You can click regions, and you can also say, well, I want a few filters. You can also use more custom panels. So in this case, let's have a look. I think we should have already quite a few with meat. So this study, well, we've done it in quite a few countries. Germany is one that's very famous for now becoming more and more plant-based. This is one I recently did, the Netherlands. So there's a lot of different ones you can choose from. If it's not here, that's exactly what that chat with us for is. So if you ask it now, probably Antonio will be the one to pick it up, and Antonio will create a panel for you. So it's all very easy to do. Then you just have to launch the study. Now, what do these results look? Oh, sorry. First, what does the survey look like? To be honest, it starts with the same question. Let me pick with the same answer. It looks quite similar. It just has more attributes. So in this case, that's a good one. I don't like any of these, to be honest. I'm not a big sausage or strips fan. I'll probably go with turkey, and I don't like chewy eggplant. Sounds horrible to me. So it goes like this, and slices. Not ideal. This is also, of course, biased because I'm using just default pictures. I like hot dogs, chicken, chewy. Oh, that's fine. A falafel, a bleeding falafel. That sounds interesting. Oh no, wait, sorry. Actually, I want to switch it. So this one best, and this one is worst, etc. So this is how you go through the questionnaire again. The results look quite similar, but now we can also see which element was the most important. In this case, flavor was the most important. We can look at things like confidence intervals. We can see flavor was very important, followed by sustainability, something I did not expect, then taste, and then type. We can look at which of the items was most preferred. To my surprise, again, sausage won, followed by patty. So patty is a very common answer to here, and strips and hot dog not. This question is not as relevant, but we can see the majority indicated that they would prefer an actual meat compared to a vegetarian or vegan alternative. Chicken winning again, chicken, beef, and turkey all being tied. But again, walnut being a close vegetarian alternative. Again, we can have a look at things like regular diet. Well, in that case, it's beef. And those that don't eat meat, we can see it's eggplant and portobello in this case. So slightly different results from this study, but the benefit is if we look at the turf, we can also combine different studies and group the data. Taste elements, whatnot, and what you probably are most interested in is simply which combination was chosen the most. In this case, a meat, sausage, chicken, crunchy flavor. Let me drag this to the side. And healthy and sustainable for a better tomorrow. So that's how you can use already this type of information. So the preference for levels, if I go to the taste, we can see that crispy and crunchy are the most liked, and people don't like bleeding anymore. And when it comes to sustainability, they really like the for a better tomorrow one. They don't like you can't beat the real thing, which is actually a slogan that one of their competitors still had. So we know that claim apparently doesn't work that great. So that's what Max Diff is. That's what Max Diff results look like. Now I want to talk about Turf Simulator because that's basically the second part of this webinar. It's a bit shorter, but it's a very useful tool to combine with a Max Diff or something like a claims test. So that's why I want to show things like claims can be put in a Max Diff. So what is turf? And again, I'm talking a lot, and if you want to give me a break, you can always ask something in the chat or in the question section. So TURF stands for Total Unduplicated Reach and Frequency. Now, this is an abbreviation I forget on the daily, so most of the time people just call it a TURF simulator. It's already quite old. It's a mathematical method from the 1950s, and it was mainly focused on things like media planning and finding, for example, what type of news stories or what type of channels yield the highest market reach, or basically the highest market reach with the broadest range. So if I have a TV show about home improvement, what should another program be directly after that to try and lure different type of people to my platform, for example? So that was a very interesting design. It works really well. And so it's really focused on finding what is market potential, as well as what's the benefit of adding something to either an existing product or changing something. The way that works is what we see on the right-hand side. So in this case, this is for another study. This is, I want to say this was, I'm not, so something with flavors. We do a lot of flavor testing and things like that. So we can see the top 5 combinations, or in this case, the top first combination is avocado, potato, corn, carrot, and broccoli. This is an 83% reach. Then if you switch, in this case, carrot for pepper, you go down a little bit, etc. Now, in this case, reach basically represents the amount of respondents who, for at least one of these products, so in this case, avocado, potato, corn, carrot, or broccoli, is their most preferred. So in this case, it looks like avocado is going to be the main one they like, because it's in every single combination. And then we can see different combinations yielding higher reach. So if we look in the TURF ladder, which is down here, we can see if we start with avocado, 22% of people have avocado as their most preferred flavor. Then if we add broccoli, we get another 20% of people that indicated, no, broccoli is my favorite. Then we can see that for corn, it goes down a little bit and it's suddenly 15.3%. So in this way, you can see, does adding a new product or a new SKU or a new flavor or a new color type, does that really trigger people saying that's the favorite? Because if you think about smartphone colors or car colors, you're going to pick your favorite color, or you pick black because of the resale value, but you're going to pick your favorite color. Your second color is not as important. It's more about the most preferred option. So in this case, we can look at the reach that basically indicates the marginal growth of reach by including something new. Now, with the TURF analysis simulator, we look at the reach, we look at combinations. I already described what reach is. Here's the verbal version or the written version. So reach represents the percentage of respondents for whom at least one of the items in the combination is their most preferred. Now you can adapt it to be slightly different, but that is it. So at least one of those in the combination is their most preferred. And it indicates about people being activated. And that's why it was originally designed for media research, because we want to activate and have what we call viewer engagement. You can use TURF in a lot of things. So you can use TURF for generic conjoint, brand-specific conjoint, claims testing, survey questions, and PBS. But I'm mainly talking about MaxDiff TURF today. The underlying math is always the same. Now, another thing I like about the TURF analysis simulator is this ladder. So you already saw it 2 slides ago. But what this ladder tells me is, what's my reach if I have 1 SKU? What's my reach if I have 2 SKUs? What's my reach if I have 3 SKUs? And so on. Now, let me link this to a study type we get a lot. So we would get a question from somebody saying, I need to sell at least 100,000 products in order to, or let's make it simple, let's not use big numbers. I have to sell at least 100 of each single option, or so in this case, every single variant. I have to sell at least 100 in order to recoup my advertisement costs and basically a break even. Now, let's say my total market is, let's say then 2,000. And so I have to sell 100 per the 2,000 options I have. That means every single variant has to give me at least 5% people that have that as their most preferred option. So as long as I get 5% new reach, so people that say this is my favorite, I will go with that variant. If it's less than 5%, most likely I'm not going to recoup my money. So we can look, the first one gets 20.6%, and 18.9%, 10%, and so on. And we can see that between 6 and 7, it drops below the 5%. So in this case, what a client would say is we're going with the first 6, maybe the first 5 options because one is 5.5, and we're not going to add those that barely anybody really has as their favorite. And this is what I like so much about Reach. We can look about how many people are activated. Now, this is very theoretical. Let's look at it and play a little bit around with it. So let's jump back to the platform. I'm going to do it for the simple study because simple study, simple results. So you simply run turf here for flavors. Now I have it open. Oh, it closed because I have been idle for a while. So in this case, you run your turf simulator, it loads it, and in the background, it's doing the math for the default. I think we're going to see avocado, corn, etc. First. Yeah. And then it automatically loads in your data for your study. And I'm just going to walk through a few of these items here on the left and a few of these items on the top. Here it simply says the number of items in a combination. So how many items do I want to cross compare? So do I want to look at combinations of 3, of 1? Well, 1 you wouldn't do a turf simulator really for, but let's say 2 to 20. And if you do 2 to 20 or something like that, or let's say you do 20, you can create something like this table. All you have to do is copy and paste it into Excel, which is this button here in your DAP. So in this case, if I would have 3 items, we can see that I get a reach of 57.4% for chicken, turkey, and walnuts. Then up top, we can also see the prioritized sequence. So this shows me how much do I get from A. In this case, chicken gives me 50%. So 50% of people prefer chicken. I get only a very little bit additional from walnuts and a little bit more from turkey. So in this case, we know chicken is by far the most preferred. So it's hard to figure out, okay, what shall I add to it? But we do see it's already chicken and walnuts. So probably all the vegetarians went for walnuts. So you can say 2 or 3 items. And you can look at the reach method. This is things like I want it to be somebody's first choice, second choice, and whatnot. Now, I'm often very strict because I always feel people only buy the flavor or the color that they prefer the most, the number 1. And in this case, we can see that would be chicken, beef, and walnuts. I can look, it's again, yeah, it's still chicken, of course, then walnuts again, and in this case, turkey. And one thing we often see with clients, so let me just go to 2 in this case, because I want a meat and a meat alternative. So what I can say here is always include either a meat or a meat alternative. So in this case, let me go with the meat alternatives because I know chicken is popular. So portobello, falafel, eggplant, chickpea, and walnuts. And what I'm telling it now is only show me combinations if at least something of this is in there. You can also make it mandatory if you say, I want at least this color. Car brands, they always want black and white in there, and then show me the other options. So it's loading it. You can also say other elements like it should actually be one of the lowest ones. This is more if you have a negative phrasing. There's a few options here. Oh, there we go. So in this case, we can see chicken and walnuts is still the most preferred. But because I force it in this case, and the only reason it shows walnuts first is because I make it have walnuts in there. So we can see, in this case, 17% had walnut as their most preferred, and the rest had chicken as their most preferred in this specific simulation. Another thing you can look at is how did each item perform separately. So it's right here. We can see overall, so for the whole study, without looking at subsegments, 29% prefer chicken, followed by beef, and walnuts is number 3. But a lot of people that like beef also like chicken. But basically, if you like chicken, if you like walnuts, you don't like chicken, beef, turkey, etc. So this is the type of information you can get. You can look at correlations. Well, I'm going to guess that, yes, walnuts is negative with chicken, beef, and turkey. Basically, all vegetarians are probably going to be negative correlated to any type of meat. So in this case, most likely what I would recommend, or in this case, I would definitely recommend, is chicken and walnuts if you're just going for 2 SKUs. Have a meat one that's chicken-based and have a vegetarian alternative that's walnut-based. If I want 3 options and I want at least 1 vegetarian, all I have to do is slide that thing from 2 to 3. It's going to recalculate for a second. And in this case, probably what I would do is chicken, beef, and walnuts. And I can see I would get 70% of people have their favorite within these 3 options. Now, that's actually very high value. So in this case, if they tell me I only want 2 options, I would say chicken and walnuts. If they have the opportunity for 3 options, I would definitely say chicken, beef, and walnuts. So that's how you use something like a turf simulator. It's very easy to play around with. If you're ever curious, what does this mean, or is there some more information? We have a lot of information always about any single product on our website. And if you don't find it here and you just type in turf, you can already see that we have a lot of different FAQs when it comes to turf. Let's see, should be quite a long list. Yes, it keeps going. And if it's not there, again, so let's see, a turf question would probably go to Fanos or Angelica right now. So if you write that in the chat, you'll get that answer. Okay. So that's Max Diff and Turf Simulator. Just to wrap it up a little bit and give you a bit of an overview. So if we look at that simple Max Diff just based on flavor, we know chicken is the most preferred. But if we look at subsegments based on those questions we had, we know that for flexitarian or non-meat diet individuals, they prefer walnut. If we do multiple items, so multiple attributes, we know that they prefer the meat sausage with chicken flavor and a crunchy taste and healthy and sustainable. And that for a better tomorrow is a very good claim. If we looked at vegetarians, in that case, it was the eggplant patty. But if we then look at the Reach simulator, it said, yes, some like eggplant. But if we look at what is their most preferred option, it's actually chicken together with walnuts. So that is how you can use something like a Max Diff and a turf simulator to figure out both what the people like the most, what the people like the least, but most of the time that's not what you're going to sell, but also which combinations basically activate unique individuals. So I know if I go with this option, I'm getting this crowd. But if I add this option, I unlock a whole new crowd that's also activated by my combination. Okay? In this case, chicken and walnuts. So that's a lot of information about Max Diff. Let me just recap it a little bit. So Max Diff is a trade-off technique. It looks at multiple pairwise comparisons, a fancy name for basically saying we show a few different options next to each other and we ask which do you like the most or which you like the least. And because people answer that multiple times, roughly 12 times, we get a very clear individual profile. If we have screening questions or segment questions, we can look at their segment as well. And we can also look at our horse sample that represents the population. It's all meant to be easy to set up. Literally, the examples I made were probably 10, 15 minutes set up. So apologies if they didn't look as polished, but I wanted to show how easy it is, how accessible it is. The results are very robust because we ask very specific questions. So we don't have the response biases that things like Likert skills have. And the turf simulator is ideal for figuring out the highest market reach or the highest activation potential of different combinations. And it's also a very useful tool, especially if you use the turf ladder to figure out the number of SKUs you want to launch. Now, that was everything I hope you need to know about turf and Max Diff in 50 minutes or less. What I want to do now is I want to open the floor if there's any questions. So that's exactly what I'm here for. So if you have a question, please write it in the chat or in the question section. If you have to rush to a next meeting and after this you go, I wanted to ask something, either just look me up on LinkedIn because that's the only one I have on my smartphone, and write to Stijn Menzel. Book a call with our team. You can get a 20-minute demo with no cost whatsoever. We can show you more specific elements you might be interested in. You can write to support@conjointly.com, but I would always recommend use that chat function because that's exactly what it's there for, 24/7 coverage. Okay. So what I'll do now is I'll stop sharing my screen and have a look if there's any questions popping up. No questions yet, but I can see from my side that a few of you are typing. So I'm just going to please take your time to write. And so let me just go back to the poll. I hope I was able to also show if the methodology is a fit for you. For those that think, well, maybe Conjoint seems more for me, we also do webinars on Conjoint analysis. That's a real namesake. I believe I still have one, no, next week, maybe Monday. Let me quickly look. I have it open here. Yes, on Monday at 3 p.m. So at the same time slot, but then on Monday I have it. And I think I also have it on Wednesday that week at 10. So in case Conjoint analysis seemed like the thing you were interested in, you can also learn more about that. Something from Joanna. For the demo version of your platform, and browse around to see if something my team could use. Yes, thank you, Joanna. That's a very useful plug, actually. And I'll share my screen for that for a second. So whenever you create a free account at Conjointly, and literally it is free, there's no hidden fees, we don't care about that. We have quite some users, often students, that use our free version. So if you sign up for a free version, now I should already be logged in, so it goes immediately there. You have access to the whole platform. You can create any type of study design you want to do. So if you want to make a generic Conjoint, click on Start. And what you're going to see is basically 90% of what you need to change is already there. So cars, well, yesterday there was a student asking me, can I do this for how attractive an apartment is, so for real estate. So in this case, you then add something like the amount of rooms, square footage, solar panels was one he really wanted to focus on, etc. So you just change these elements, you change the price points, that's it. With the free demo account, if you're doing a simple survey, so that's questions like multiple choice questions, etc., you can get unlimited responses as long as you use the shareable link. If you want to do something like a generic Conjoint, you can collect data from up to 20 people. Again, using the shareable link, because for the participant panels, we ask the additional fees. Most of the time, let's say $3 per completion. But it's a very useful way to just start and play around. And what we notice a lot of people do is play around with it, send a few links to your colleagues and say, hey, what do you think about this study? Is it easy to understand? And then you look at the results you get from those 20 colleagues. Well, these had 20, a sample size of 20 is not that big, but you can at least understand kind of what are the trends I see, what are the elements I see, etc. So launching a Max Diff is exactly as easy. Let me see, here's Max Diff in purple. So it's more about concept elements. You can simply adapt this to anything and you can launch it without any additional fee and collect data up to 20 people. Yeah. Thank you, Joanna, for that. I often forget to mention that we have the free version. Yeah, I hope that explanation helped a little bit. Question from Lee, will you be able to send the surveys from popular platforms like LinkedIn followers, Instagram followers? Yes, so sharing surveys, so I assume it's relating to sharing surveys. So typically speaking, where's my experiment? I have it over here. No, I have it over here. You get a shareable link. So you can simply put this on LinkedIn or a QR code. We see this often at conferences and we misuse it ourselves as well. We put QR codes everywhere. But so that is one option. If you know a little bit about something, so there's also the possibility to redirect. It's not overtly complicated. And we also do API elements. It's all a bit more technological information. Let me just go to the regular Conjoint website, not the legal. And then in this case, if you want to do something like a redirect to LinkedIn, does it show up already here? Yeah, how to integrate conjointly with third-party software surveys. So we have a clear explanation if you use it with SurveyMonkey or whatever, but also if you want to share it on LinkedIn, either the QR code or just redirecting using this tool. I hope that helps a bit, Lee. Happy to help. Any other questions from you guys? There's still a few of you here, so I'm always happy about that. Are there other things you would like to see a webinar on? There's still more than 10 of you. So if there's a webinar topic that you go, I would immediately join to that. You can always write that now in the chat as well. That's often my main focus on is figuring out what to make one on next. And if you say, well, I would love to know more about A, B, or C, you can always let me know. A few of you are typing, so I'm still going to pay some attention here. And I'll stop my screen sharing for a sec again. The Monday webinar about Conjointly. Yeah, so the Conjoint one, it really goes into what are attributes and levels. And it's going to be similar as Max Diff in how to set up a design. But Max Diff and conjoint analysis give quite different results because conjoint analysis is more about feature combinations as well as price testing. And so if you want to incorporate prices, I typically would recommend going conjointly and not Max Diff. You can do it via Max Diff, but I would say the mathematical modeling works better when it comes to conjoint from my personal experience. But so I hope to see you on Monday then, Joanna. So that will be nice. Okay. I don't see anybody typing and no additional questions right now. So what I'm going to do is say thank you, first of all, for joining today. It was the first time we did the Max Diff webinar, so I hope it was informative and a little bit entertaining. So once again, thank you for joining. If you want to see any of our other webinars, so we do conjoint analysis, we do software feature research, we do general statistics, I think. And what's the next one? I will also have advanced conjoint in the near future. So there's some webinars. If you go to our website, at the top, you will see a bracket called webinars even. So you can always join for that. And if you have questions, you always know how to find us. And I would always recommend just use the chat with us function. We all have it open on our second screen, so I will be there shortly as well. Okay. Then, once again, thank you for joining, and I hope everybody has a lovely day. Have a good one.